So, you want to be a doctor and you have a disability. In spite of your disability, you know you can be a great doctor. There's only one issue, the MCAT, an incredibly difficult standardized test that requires the writer to sit all day with minimal breaks, read long, boring paragraphs, while answering questions hardly relevant to medicine with barely enough time to even breathe. How can someone even without a disability manage? You decide to pursue accommodations. It makes sense. Maybe you got accommodations in the past, and you got them because you really needed them to finish exams on time or to take breaks. But then the guilt kind of comes. You begin to feel like it is unfair that you get accommodations. Maybe you are also aware that in other countries with more prejudice, the word accommodation virtually does not even exist. And speaking of prejudice, the process to get approved for MCAT accommodations seems too long and tedious. So you then decide to just do it without accommodations. It is a disaster. You did not finish the exam on time in most sections, despite practicing and studying for months. Your final score is in the low percentiles, and you feel awful because you were not fast enough and could not focus for long enough to read every passage. And then you think, I'll never be a doctor now. Now, this is what happened to me in 2020. And let me tell you, it was not fun. I landed at 38 percentile, or 498, way off from the competitive average of 511 to get into my goal university. I scored 13 percentile, 121 in CARS, which is the most important section for Canadian medical schools. I did not finish reading the last 3 or 2 passages and completely guessed between 10 to 15 questions. My ADHD made it difficult to read quickly, especially on the long and boring subject matter in CARS. And after that experience, I decided I needed to at least try to get accommodations. Now, what I did not anticipate was the multitude of barriers that would be thrown my way, including stuff I wish I knew when I was writing my application or even before. Today, I hope to share these things with you, and I hope this video not only shows you how to apply, but also how to apply well, so that the AMC can approve what you need to do well on the MCAT. I remember in the past I had several people tell me, almost like to scare me, you can't get accommodations on the MCAT. I remember thinking, that's not right. Why would they say this? Of course, they do not have a disability themselves or anything else like that. It just seemed weird to me. Now, often it seems people become upset when they learn that there are accommodations. They believe it gives some students the upper hand. But this just reveals their ableism, and I believe this ableism is a big issue, especially like in medicine. The reason why I think that the ableism is present in the AMC is because the process that they have made in getting approved for accommodations is incredibly difficult. But let's take a second to look at this. Is it unfair to get accommodations on the MCAT, extra time? According to a lawsuit filed against the AAMC in 2008, the time limits on the MCAT have not been correlated with the reading or problem-solving speed necessary for success in medical school or the practice of medicine. And this is par for the course for most standardized tests. In fact, the only other standardized tests that I've had to take in my life, which are called the diploma exams out of high school in Alberta, they now actually give everybody extra time. So it seems to me like they at least recognize how unfair the time limits can be. Now, I could sit here all day and list all the reasons why standardized tests like the MCAT are bull and based on the same eugenic pseudoscience that was used to justify countless discrimination and sterilization, even murder of thousands and thousands of... I think I'll stop there. I think you get the point, because standardized tests are bull. The companies who make them are often sued. And this is literally how change has come about over the years, through lawsuits. According to a 2005 article, it was a lawsuit in California that first allowed people to get accommodations for the MCAT. Since California had more progressive state laws, they held up in court against the federal disability laws that the AAMC used to justify not providing accommodations. Despite finally giving accommodations, they decided to start flagging exam scores for med schools to see who tested in non-standard conditions. Now note the language used here. It is a slimy way to frame literally violating the privacy of disabled individuals whose future depends on this exam and the perceptions it creates of them from medical schools. So flash forward to 2015. The MCAT is now the last exam in North America to flag accommodated exam scores. According to a blog post on studentdoctor.net, in the prior year, so 2014, the LSAT, which is the exam for law school, had to stop flagging exam scores because they lost a lawsuit and they lost it badly. They were also fined several $1 million on top of becoming quite the news story. They got burned, and they got burned bad. The MCAT was now in the spotlight as the last exam to violate the privacy of disabled people. So they made the smart move to stop flagging their exams in 2015. Awesome! I can now get accommodations and choose if med schools know if I have a disability or not. Sounds nice. Although it wasn't and still is not very nice. According to that same blog post, receiving accommodation of the MCAT is still extremely difficult. The MCAT has a reputation for setting the bar extremely high relative to other standardized tests. According to the latest data that they could find, less than 1% of MCAT examinees are approved for extended time, stop-the-clock breaks, extended breaks, or other accommodations that change the timing. So that sucks, and it's really disheartening. I don't know how the stats have changed over the years, but as I mentioned earlier, in this video, I want to share what I know, and hopefully it will help you. And so let's move into the most important things to remember when applying for MCAT accommodations. So the first thing, I think, and arguably the most important thing to remember, is time. Applying for accommodations takes a lot of time. I did not know this, and despite starting my application in February of 2021 to take my exam in July, I literally received my accommodations with only 1 day of breathing room to be able to write my exam with accommodations. For reference, I hit submit on my accommodations application on April 4th, got my accommodations back on June 3rd, and wrote my exam on July 22nd. It may take you some time to go do the application, especially if you need to get a new psychological evaluation like I did, or something similar, as these take at least a month to get. Now, as a quick note, you not only need a new evaluation for ADHD, but your old one if you have it. It seems to me that it's very unlikely to get accommodations without having both, but it is still definitely worth trying to apply without having an old one. Now, after hitting apply, there is a long 60-day review period which they will decide to either accept with modifications, or reject your application for accommodations. Now, you can submit an appeal if needed, but this will take an additional 30 days to process. And it might be worth noting that appeals are almost never approved, but how you would get approved for an appeal is if you had newer documents to submit with the appeal or repeal. So that will increase your chances of getting approved. Now, on top of this, you might also want to apply for financial assistance. Applying can be expensive, and it was for me. I had to spend 2,400 Canadian dollars on that new evaluation. I basically chose applying for accommodations over MCAT prep. But one thing to note, a lot of universities can actually do this evaluation for free. And unfortunately for me, I had graduated at that point, so I was kind of out of luck. So if you are in your degree, look into it, because that can save you a lot of money. Now, for the financial assistance, I wish I had the time to apply for it, I really do, but I was already behind in applying and studying and needed to start my content review. I also saw it was only $800 at most that they can give you. And while that's decent money, it didn't seem like enough to me to warrant applying, and so I just decided to switch to studying. So yeah, try to organize your application so you have time to apply for financial assistance if needed. And I want to give an example of what I would have done differently. Say you plan to write the exam next summer, so July 2023. You would apply for accommodations this fall. So maybe start your application in September, so that then you can get your accommodations by the new year, and then you'll know what you'll be dealing with. I think that would be the best way forward for it. That said, if that is not an option and you are panicking, I need to do this application, don't get discouraged and just apply as soon as you can. Now, I want to talk about the documents that are needed for the application. So number one, you need a personal statement. 2, a current evaluation, 3, transcripts, 4, standardized test scores, 5, accommodations received, and 6, supporting academic records, 7, previous evaluation reports, and 8 would be, there's like this questionnaire that you need to fill out. I want to mention that it is best to gather every single document you have that was ever written about you in regards to your disability. I was lucky enough to have been diagnosed and put on meds at a very young age, and so had a plethora of documents I could show the AAMC. As some examples, I had my old evaluation from when I was 7 years old, several letters specifying a need for accommodations and even notes on medications, prior exam scores, and so on. For a specific example, when I was in grade 12, I really struggled to manage my ADHD, and a psychiatrist wrote to the school that I needed extra support for exams and studying. Now, it is important to frame the whole application as a narrative of how your disability has affected you and your life. All of these documents will help to back up your claims in a way similar to writing a research paper and using references to back up what you're saying. Now, I want to move on to, I guess, a mistake that I made. It has to do with the questionnaire. So this section is the questionnaire and the accommodations that I asked for. The questionnaire seems small, and it is small relative to the rest of the application, but there is something I want to mention about it because it is more important than I realized. I decided to ask for double time, which I believe to be more than I probably needed, but I thought it would be best to ask for more, as I thought maybe even if I didn't get what I asked for, they would still give me a bit given my very large ask. And to add to this, I did have a document to back this up. I got double time in my final semester at university due to COVID, but in all other semesters and high school I did have time and a half. So I suspected they were only going to partially approve me for just time and a half, because that's what I used to have most of the time. So moving on to how this is relevant for the questionnaire. I initially started an accommodations application in 2019 when I first attempted to study for the MCAT. So I had written out the questionnaire a little bit already. Now in 2019, I said that I like to take breaks when studying, which is true. But for some reason, I said that this also applied to exams. I don't know why or remember why I put that down, but that is not something I actually like to do. I've always sat and finished exams in one go as I get into a bit of a hyper-focused flow state, but reflecting on this, I believe I put that down at the time because I was thinking of different ways to write exams, and taking breaks popped in my mind as something maybe that's worth trying to do. Regardless, I did not initially think it would matter too much because I was not asking for breaks, just extra time. And so I just chose to include this statement. It was already taking so long to write this application, so why would I rewrite something that's already written? Now, it turned out it did matter because they used these words to justify not giving what I asked for. Instead of giving me double time, they gave me time and a quarter, which I didn't even know was an option. I've never heard of anybody ever getting time and a quarter in university. People in university either got time and a half or double time. I've never heard of time and a quarter. Anyways, they also gave me stop the clock breaks. That was surprising to me. They gave me 30 minutes per day because with accommodations it's split into 2 days. So they gave me 30 minutes on the first day of stop the clock breaks for the 2 sections. It spreads out, and 30 minutes for the next day. What the heck? Why did they give that to me? I was so surprised. They said that you describe needed extended time in part to allow for you to take mental breaks to reset your mind. And so, this break time provides an opportunity for you to pause and/or step away from the exam to refresh your attentional resources, regroup, and refocus without taking away from your time for test taking. What freaking heroes! They're giving me breaks so I don't waste my time recouping my attentional resources, even though I simply asked for more time so that I could choose what I do with the time. I want to use the time for the breaks. I was very infuriated by this because to me this felt like a useless addition. I didn't think I would use these breaks. You cannot do any work on the exam during the breaks, despite just sitting there in front of a paused blue screen. Apparently though, some testing centers allow you to write after hitting pause. So you could theoretically write down all the variables for calculation and then calculate it during a break. So when I arrived at the testing center, and I want to describe the center a bit so there's some context in case you haven't been in one yet, These centers are always so unnecessarily guarded with cameras everywhere. They have a palm vein scanner that doesn't even work sometimes, but a vein scanner to know that it's you. They also have monitors for the workers to watch your every move. So I nervously asked them, could I write during my breaks? But it seemed they did not realize I had accommodations. Now in hindsight, with that 1% stat, that like only 1% of people get approved, it makes sense. These workers probably never had to deal with somebody with accommodations before. Both the two workers there didn't know I had accommodations until after my first section was done. Regardless, I asked, could I write during my breaks? The person I asked got super suspicious, and instead of asking me like why I was asking that, they immediately just said a stern no, and proceeded to watch me extra carefully for the entire day. And this only increased my nerves more. So on test day when taking breaks, I did not write anything in case they would see on the camera. This still worked, however, as I had practiced my exams for this very scenario. I would write down the variables during the exam time and then calculate answers in my head during the break time, because they could control my physical movements, but they could not control my mind. Moving on to the psychological evaluation. I want to cover the psych eval in more detail in another video, so be sure to subscribe for more. But I will share what I think is most important in this video. Firstly, you need to find someone who can do your evaluation. Now for me, that was a psychologist I found off of Google. And the way that I found her was I basically phoned around for different psychologists that did diagnoses for ADHD and basically asked them, how quickly can you do this evaluation for me? Because I needed it in a month. So you can refer to the AAMC website on what counts as a qualified professional for a specific evaluation. You will also need them to confirm their qualifications in either the report itself or a separate document. I had mine write up a separate document, like a shortened CV. Now secondly, you really need to sit down with your evaluator and make sure they know what this is for and how to write it. This was my biggest mistake actually. And likely why I didn't get approved for everything that I needed. In the feedback I got from the AAMC, they told me that my psych evaluation did not specify any functional limitations preventing me from writing the exam. Even though the evaluation seemed clear to me, I missed important information on the website specifying this. Oh, and as I was writing this, I came across more BS. This evaluation needs to be current. What does that mean? Current. Current means no more than 6 months prior to the anticipated MCAT date. Because yes, of course, my ADHD is just going to magically disappear 6 months after being evaluated. Anyway, in this document, it specifies what elements a diagnostic report should contain. So really, really make sure your evaluator reads this, as it will help both of you in getting what you need. I want to just pause for a second in the video here and talk about and like reflect on things here. This is all a bunch of BS. They make someone who already struggles to do things normally do all of this. The University of Toronto, Mount Royal University, and other prior institutions I've dealt with have always made the process of getting accommodations smooth, straightforward, and private. In these cases, a simple letter from a doctor was often enough to get accommodations. Now, I really struggled doing boring applications, and applying for accommodations was not only boring, but low-key traumatic, as I had to relive how ADHD has made me screw up over the years. So the AAMC is really, really bad at this, and it needs to improve. Or better yet, we stop requiring the MCAT. Now, I can't help but feel like this only decreases disability representation among doctors, because I want to remind you that the MCAT is not associated with med school success at all. Moving on to the personal statement. I believe this document is the most important, especially in tying all the threads together to form your narrative. So like the psych eval, I think I will make a video down the line covering the personal statement in more detail. So be sure to like, subscribe, and share, as the interest in these videos will keep me going. Now for me, for my personal statement, I started at the beginning. I described myself as a kid and what led to my diagnosis, including specific examples of things I did. For example, I didn't include this, but I yelled out, "Hey look everyone, there was an ass in class," when I saw that the teacher had written ass on the board in class. But anyways, so following childhood, I described my issues in high school, as this was a time when my ADHD symptoms became especially troubling. and when I first started getting accommodations due to frequently being unable to finish exams on time. Now, following this, I spoke on my success with accommodations at Mount Royal University, with specific examples again referring to other documents in my application as I went. One of the best parts of my personal statement is one that I swear the AMC says not to do. I cannot remember where I heard this or when I heard it, but I remember finding out, probably from the MCAT Reddit, that if you write without accommodations and then try to get accommodations, that you have a low chance of getting approved. I think this is actually untrue, as I have since found others saying to do what I did. I already wrote the MCAT without accommodations, so I used my experience writing it without to describe how my ADHD prevented me from finishing the sections. I think I mentioned already in my intro how that resulted. Just to mention some general advice for the personal statement. Number 1, talk about your accommodations and impairment history. Number 2, specify functional limitations and how they impact your ability to write the exam. And number 3, use the documents in your application to sort of back up your personal statement. And get creative with it. This could include even like your transcripts. Like, for example, I used my high school grades to show how I did without accommodations versus in university with accommodations. Okay, so you submitted your application. Now what? You wait exactly 60 days. This is one more gripe I have with this whole process. 60 freaking days, right on the dot. I just know they probably only review your application the week they are due, because that's something I would do, but this is the worst. And after waiting that long, to only find out I was partially approved was even worse, but we gotta stay positive here. Many places around the world do not even get accommodations on anything. We are truly blessed to have them. But that does not negate the fact that this process should be easier. Anyways, if you liked the video, give it a like and tell me what you thought of it in the comments below. And if you're feeling crazy, why not subscribe? I mean, it is free and I will make more related content down the line. So thanks so much for watching, and I wish you success in your path to becoming a medical doctor.